Greetings my lovelies, and thank you for stopping by the circle today. Today I want to talk about one of my all-time favorite authors. She's the reason why I wanted to be a writer in middle school, and I still have some of her books to this day. My originals from when I was 12, all stained up with ramen. And I'm going to talk about Tamora Pierce, more specifically the Song of the Lioness. So let's go. So I have been a fan of Tamora Pierce ever since I was in middle school. I got the Song of the Lioness, which is her first quartet. Absolutely fell in love with it. My personal favorite is The Immortals, which involves Dane and a bunch of other awesome characters, but I'm not talking about them today. I'm talking about Alana and the beginning of this wonderful world that I have fallen in love with. And I don't care that these things are considered juvenile or young adult fiction. I started reading them when I was a kid and I still love them to this day. So let's go ahead and just talk about the basic world into which a million stories have erupted from. So the vast majority of her stories, in fact, maybe not all, I haven't read all of her books, take place in a world I'm just going to call Tortal. That is one kingdom in a series of a bunch of other ones that's kind of Eurocentric. It's very easy to pinpoint the inspiration that she took. So Tortal is clearly Europe. You have the Khmer, which I think are either Chinese or maybe Japanese. It's never really 100% stated. Although you have the Shang, which are like wandering samurai that walk around completing great feats. You have Karakth, which is clearly Egypt and Africa. And then you have some areas that are like Scandinavia and so on and so forth. But that's not what makes this world great. What makes this world great is one, the characters, but B, the magic system. This world feels lived in and is probably one of the most realistic magic systems I have ever read to date. So when it comes to the magic, some people are born with it, some people are not. It tends to kind of flow along with families of varying degrees. So you may have a relative that's really strong with the magic that they call the gift, or you could have someone that's, just kind of like, oh, I can only do one or two things. And just like with any type of skill, some people have a proficiency in certain areas. So some people are good at combat magic. Some magic is used for religious purposes, like shamans and the desert people. Sometimes it's primarily used for healing in this series, mostly because fighting at nights and all that. But then you also just have like archaic people who just like to study magic and create spells that they probably shouldn't, but they are lost in the pursuit of academic knowledge. You also have limits. So however strong you are as a person, like your will and just physically, is about how much magic you can exert. And there's a wonderful sort of punishment for overusing it. You either A, pass out, B, the magic goes crazy and can end up burning you, or C, you end up taking your own life force to defeat your enemy. Like I said, best magic system to date. Now, because this is a medieval type setting and the start of the book series is a lot of like patriarchal bullshit that we kind of have to deal with. That does kind of run along to a few of the other series. Like some of the things that happen with Alana also come up to play with Kel. And basically there are no lady knights until Alana. And if you haven't read these books, it's kind of very easy to see how they're going, but I will try to leave a fair majority of the spoilers out if I can, if I remember. Because once I get going, I get going. So now that we kind of understand a little bit of the world, let's go ahead and talk about the characters of this series. So the Song of the Lioness, or the Lioness Rampant, is a quartet, meaning there are 4 books that make up the entire series. We have Alana, the first song, In the Hands of the Goddess, She Who Rides Like a Man, and The Lioness Rampant, which is the last one. So our main character is, of course, Alana, who's this red hair, violet-eyed beauty, who also happens to have a twin, Tom. Now they're in a bit of a pickle, because one, they're noble, so there are things that are expected of them. For Tom, he is expected to go off to become a knight since he is the firstborn and only male of their household. Alana is expected to go off and learn to be a lady. Well, here's the problem. She's more apt. She has a greater aptitude for the combat arts, so hunting, fighting, riding, all that fun jazz. While Tom just likes to learn magic and likes to deal with it, he'd rather be a priest. Not necessarily like a priest, but like an academic priest. Like you have, you know, professors that aren't really professors, they just learn a lot and they have that title type of scenarios. Anywho, so they decide to swap places by convincing the two servants that are going to take them to their respective places to allow them to switch. So for Maud, she is their healer. She sort of sees like a lot of crazy things in a fire sequence and agrees, and they bully Corman, who is terrified of magic and what have you. So they make the switch. Alana goes to the castle and she has a bit of a rough time learning how to, like, you know, deal with discipline and not having to do, well, not doing everything exactly as she wants it. But, you know, that's typical military stuff. Everyone has a rough time during boot camp. But along the way, she does make some very powerful and true friends. So she makes friends with John, who is the crown prince, who also has to go through the knighthood, although for him it's kind of optional. However, they do state in the book that a king who is knighted is more powerful and respected than a king who isn't. Then we have Gareth the Younger, more commonly referred to as Gary. His father is in charge of overseeing all the training for the pages, esquires, and yada yada yada. You have Alex, who is kind of quiet and slinky. Raoul, who is just the himbo that we all love and adore. But she also makes a few friends outside of the royal court, primarily George, who is a young, dashing but charming king of thieves of Tortle. And another one of the major players is Duke Roger, which is John's uncle, and Sir Miles, who is kind of like their history teacher, who's a knight, but kind of like a frumpy dumpy knight. Like, he did battles, but now he just sits around, drinks, and talks about things. Like, he's become more philosophical in his older years, and I still love him to this day. So through the course of the four books, you know, Alana goes through the trials of becoming a knight, via page, squire, actually becoming a knight and having some adventures, ultimately coming to this giant climax with lots of magic, necromancy, and just all around gut-wrenching, oh my god, my heart type of scenarios. Final thoughts. While this isn't my favorite of her books, I still absolutely love this series. When I get like a tickle to go ahead and just reread everything that I have of her, I always start with Alana and then just go through to the end. There are still a couple that I haven't read, only because I just haven't gotten around to it and I don't really have that much of an interest to read them. I'm quite happy with the ones that I have, but still, like, this book changed me. Like, changed me. I read it, and after that I started writing fan fiction even before I knew what fan fiction was. The world is rich and complex. Every culture has their own traditions, multiple gods. You have major gods and minor gods, and it's just phenomenal. And especially when they add into like the creatures and the monsters that come into play in later series. Alana is a very driven character. She has her goals and she goes for it, but the one thing I love about her is she's short. She spends half her time complaining that she is so short. Like, she's probably like my height, really skinny because she works out all the time. Everyone calls her a runt because where are her muscles, because all the guys around her are big and burly, yet she systematically continues to whoop their ass, not because she has this grand gift, but because she works her ass off. She gets up early, she stays late, and she practices with the sword to the point where she becomes a natural. Has a gift of magic, is afraid of it at first, but then learns how to control it to the point where she ends up becoming like a shaman later on and developing her own spells. She has a few relationships throughout the series. I think only about 3, in all honesty, now that I'm really thinking about it. You know, one of them, they're just too much alike and they bash heads and then they end it and they move on with no real resentment because they were still friends first. The second one, was meh, whatever, but he was someone who really just could not accept all sides of her, so she let him go because she can't be anything other than herself, which is a powerful message when you were like in middle school to read that. And then her last one is a person who, you know, it's kind of like a friends to lovers type of scenario, who's always been there. He's made it very abundantly clear that he has feelings for her, but he always respected her boundaries and did not make her feel guilty for his emotions. He is a keeper. And in the end, she realizes that she does like him. He's always been there for her. So they start out with a romantic relationship just to see where it goes. She doesn't fall like madly in love with him and they go on this whirlwind great adventure. She's like, you know, let's have a go at it, basically, and they end up getting married. Now, ironically, I didn't realize that this book series is older than me. The first book was published in 1983. I was born in 1986. So it's only slightly older than I am, but still, I absolutely love it. Although, probably the one thing that I laugh about the most, that if this book was written today, probably wouldn't be allowed to be in it now, is that they have magical birth control. And they do spend a good portion of their time, almost an entire chapter dedicated to Alana's first bleeding, the birds and the bees talks, and then her receiving a magical talisman to prevent her from getting pregnant. And it's not like she gets it because she wants to go off and have sex. She's given it and told to wear it just in case. Because you never know when your decisions may change, and is go ahead to start thinking about, if not already preparing for, precautions to prevent against pregnancy. I love that whole bit. And another thing that I also absolutely love is while Alana is a very tomboy, masculine presenting type of female, she doesn't look down on the feminine aspects of herself. She kind of struggles a bit bouncing back and forth between, you know, her rough night side and her side as a lady, but she ends up learning how to meld them together, and she doesn't look down on anyone who wants to pursue a more feminine path. She actually makes a lot of friends with women who have traditional women roles. And again, amazing for a book written in the 80s, or probably because it was written in the 80s. Well, that's all that I have for you today. I will see you all next time, and if you've read anything, honestly, by Tamora Pierce, comment down below. Let me know which one is your favorite, and should I do the rest of the series. So, see you all later. Bye!